Go ahead, Jay.
This is the presentation entitled The Tao of Joyful Transformation Through Quantum Physics.
What's the matter, Jay?
It's not,
Moving?
yeah, the slide is not moving.
It's like
It was moving before, so I guess we need to, I wonder what it can.
So don't you, aren't you? doing
Yeah,
this?
yeah, I was doing this to roll up the slides. This is a presentation entitled The Tao of Joyful Transformation Through Quantum Physics. It was about 10 or at the most 12 years ago. I was working as hospice chaplain in the coastal city of Ventura, Southern California. I approached the building, nursing home, thinking about this new patient. So after getting out of my car, I opened up my file folder, looked at his face sheet, and it said 57 years old, and diagnosis is cirrhosis of the liver. I said to myself, and I got into the building, walked to his room. The door was slightly open, so I peeked in, and he was lying on his back, seemingly asleep. So quietly, ever so quietly, I knocked. No response. I knocked it again, and then I peeked again, no response. So slowly opening the door, I said, "Hi, good morning." I called the name of the patient. No response. I said, "Hi," again, no response. So I began introducing myself. This is Chaplain J. Chaplain J. And I heard a voice coming out of his mouth. It said, "Hi, Chaplain. I'm a strictly math and science type of guy." And then he turned away from me and faced the wall. And then no response thereafter. It really made me speechless. What should I say? He is strictly a math and science type. So the implication is you can't do anything for me, with me. I don't have anything to do with you. And then, without my ever conscious thought, I said these words. Have you heard of quantum physics? No response. Then I said, sleep tight tonight. I'll see you tomorrow morning. So I walked out. Now that was a remarkable point in my lifelong search for some way of bringing together spirituality and science. And it became eventually a passion of mine, even hot, red hot passion burning inside. And my long memory of school days and onward, ending up in the Harvard Divinity School, devoting 4 solid years to the study of spirituality. And my search was already one notch higher with a greater urgency. Why science? Why science? I was asking. Then His Holiness Dalai Lama's word came to my mind. During my readings of his writings, and this passage for a long while has been in my mind. I wanted to learn about it. In this case, it meant science. So I wanted to learn about science because I recognized in it a compelling way to communicate the insights gleaned from my own spiritual tradition. His was and still is Buddhism, specifically Tibetan Buddhism. So now I'm going to take up some time with you and divide this gigantic, vast subject into some manageable portions and then go one after another. So first part would be some basic principles of quantum physics that turned the classic physics upside down. And then thereafter, the same revolution in quantum physics, which took place in life sciences, such as biology and epigenetics, so forth. So here, let's move on. Let's move on with first, the uncertainty principle. First, I need to add some preface because the basic subject is the atom, particularly as if the atom itself is not small enough, subatomic things called particle or electrons and so forth. So it used to be said that now the atom is not your grandfather's atom anymore. So there was a time when people, even competent, well-trained physicists, were debating among themselves, what does the atom look like? How would you draw it? So there was a time, about the turn of the 1900s, this physicists started drawing to explain to one another, this is how I think the atom looks. And quite a long debate came about. And then at that time, one particularly got some on that traction. And that is, it was a theory of the atom as the plum pudding with raisins, a few of them, embedded into that. That's how about 100 years ago, peoples of all scientists view of the atom. And then there was that neat looking drawing, circle, and then within it, there's a dot in the center, nucleus, and then something going around in an oval circle that's supposed to be a particle. Okay, now the quantum physics came up with the atom, and it is looking like, it reminded me when I first saw that picture of the current idea of atom. It looked like you got a cotton ball and you dipped it in a gray colored ink and then let it out and then dry. And the inside of atom was supposed to look like that, very fuzzy, and you can't put anything on that pointing to, this is electron and this is the nucleus. But anyway, that is really current view of the atom, and let's delve into it. So there came the first theory or principle of quantum physics, and that is the uncertainty principle. The nature of this particle inside the atom, this scientists concluded, is very uncertain to describe, because the electron that runs around the nucleus is jumping up and down around and so on. Sometimes it acts like a wave, sometimes as particle. And no scientist could say, well, now you will see the particle, or now it will turn into wave. It's as if nobody can predict on it, put any finger on it in any way, different ways. So one time it could be a wave, one time it could be a particle. So that's where then the term came, the uncertainty principle. The most familiar way of describing the uncertainty came from, I think, most familiar to people, is the uncertainty principle announced by Werner Heisenberg. By saying so, he continued saying, one cannot really measure the location or momentum of the particle. So that's where the term came, the uncertainty of it all. If you delve into it further, it comes from this very nature of the atom and its particle, as I described it. You cannot know, predict under what circumstances, at what point in time you will see a particle or a wave. So, and then give it to some with a different talent on experimenting among them. So among them, they devised, and the one that I am familiar with, and I think that represents the general current explanation of it in terms of what the elementalist could show. So here we are. Please picture here 3 setup, 1, 2, 3. So on the top, that's a machine gun known as Bourne's machine gun. That's a plain machine gun that shoots bullets. That is in the most objective current classic physics can say, yeah, that's the object, bullet. Please look at the next wall or barrier there. And that barrier is the armored surfaced kind of a block. And then there are 2 holes there. See, do you see that there? And slits or holes. And then the next stand wall there is a sort of a sensor in the wall there. And then this sensor would count and indicate, yeah, I got it, and then no, I didn't get it, and that kind of thing. So the scientists closed up hole 2, but kept the hole 1, okay? 1, 2, and then hole 1 is open, and then 2 is closed. Now, so machine gun shoots, bullets come, those that can come through this hole 1, and the next detecting board, you can see the bullet hits right here, and then the counter here, sensor count, shows only the pile on this direct line with hole 1. Okay, so now closed, the hole 1 is closed, and the hole 2 is open. And then what do you see? Then the hole 2 accumulates the bullet marks here. See? Okay. Now let's see what happens when both holes are open. So both are open, and then what happens is right here, the next sensor set up there. And the two piles in line with both pole 1 and 2. All right, so no question, any classic physicist could accept that. How about using water? Because water is basically the property is wave. So clever instrumentalist came up with this setup. It's a paddle wheel, and it can create waves, and then shoot them to the similar setup, but material of the setup is a little different. It's a board there with the two holes here, hole 1, 2, and then the detecting board. It is covered, studded with the cork bombs. That's a clever, right? And of course, cork bombs would, record it there. So hole 1 goes through, sends the waves here. Hole 1 sensor accumulates the marks there. And then 2 here, and then here 2. And then, let's open up both holes. What happens? Here, where this is the change. Instead of 2 piles of records of getting hit, only one in the center. So that reminds me of something different from the objective kind of bullet trace. The third, the final test is a test with the electron. The setup is, it's a gadget where inside tungsten is heated. So when tungsten filament is heated up, it boils off electrons, and then the similar setup, just the materials are different. Hole 1, 2. And the hole 1, okay, there is a pile of marks. And then same thing, hole 1 closed, hole 2 open. And then you can see right here, below 1 there. So that one is and showing the hits there. And then when both holes are open, and then the electrons coming through, and then see what? Same thing as the water, see? So all together. The water does that because it's basic nature of interference. When water is split on the way down, and then after that splitting, whatever opposite, then the water turns together and the flows as one, right? We see that almost every day when we are on the beach or going by the neighborhood tree. Now here, tungsten filament electrons behaves like water, see? So particle has turned into a wave. And so these waves of the electrons kind of merged together, interfering with one another, and then merged together, bringing up the marks into the center. So it is so unbelievable, so unbelievable. Why is it? And what are the implications? Implications are the line between the material and non-material truly is thin. You can say sometimes it exists, sometimes it does not. And this is the end of the determinate world, the hard, absolutely formed once and for all kind of a deterministic worldview. It just doesn't have a stand. And another also is, this is the end of the classical objectivity. Things are not that absolutely hard staying and preserving in absolute condition. So then it calls into question our generally accepted sensory experiences and our judgment we make on the basis of that. Now you can see the puzzled faces of these early quantum physics architects. People like Niels Bohr, scientist from Denmark, and then Werner Heisenberg from Germany. But they turned nowhere because they could not find any resources they could turn to in the Western tradition. So then they turned to the Eastern tradition and they looked into some ancient spiritual texts. So I just, for fun, and also this might linger on in your mind. Do you see this? This is a coat of arms of Niels Bohr. The government of Niels recognized him and knighted him. So that as his coat of arms, he devised this. And then in the center, you see the picture of the Tai Chi, yin and yang. This is how he had been influenced by the Eastern traditions. And then as to Werner Heisenberg, in his writings, he left many allusions of how some of the Japanese quantum physicists were contributing to the worldwide storage, so to speak, of new knowledge. And speculated, maybe Japanese colleagues were brought up in their Eastern tradition, and somehow in their mental attitude, or whatever mindset, they were a little more readily attuned to the new science of physics. So here then Taoism. This is my still I have a little bit of calligraphy left, which I learned back in Korea when I was very, very young. So there's a yin yang energy of qi, and then Tao is in calligraphy. The third one there. So through all these, Taoism also from the very beginning, the importance of that staying open to what now turned to be the quantum mechanics. And Hinduism also advised, inculcate its followers, withdraw from sense objects, enter into higher awareness. Sensory experiences at their best can cause delusions. So, and in Christianity, unfortunately, things were what might have been okay if it weren't for the Renaissance period, when people like René Descartes, the French philosopher, mathematician, and Isaac Newton, the England scientist, and so on. So René Descartes created the dualism by separating the mind and body radically. So mind has nothing to do with the body and vice versa. Very unfortunate thing. There are some historical reasons, particularly in terms of church history, but because of the time element here, I won't go in there. Then Isaac Newton created the world view of tight, mechanically, well-organized and well-behaved, predictably, when it will be this point and that point, and so on, and when you can expect to see it there again, and that sort of thing. So very tight universe where every hard items are behaving like the parts of the clock. Then came Emanuel Swedenborg. He was a scientist in Sweden, almost contemporary with Isaac Newton, but he was younger quite a bit than Isaac Newton. So when he came around, he became poor, and then from a scientist life to a mystic and theologian's life. Around there, he started seeing things very differently, and Isaac Newton was very wrong to him. And one just example of how insightful Swedenborg was, he conceived what was to be known as a nebular hypothesis. Some of you who have been delving into some aspects of some of this would know that. Unfortunately, some historians of ideas said Swedenborg should have received the credit of conceiving the earliest, what was to be a nebular hypothesis. That hypothesis said that the Earth did not just get created out of nothing, but it most likely spin off of the center of the solar system, that is the sun. So then someone else later on took the credit. So these are the radically different revolutionary view of reality that will also influence us who are willing to be open and pay attention in our pursuit of constant, positive, joyful transformation in our life's journey. Now, non-local principle, another revolutionary idea. Even this puzzled, confused the great mind of Albert Einstein. Now, these two subatomic particles inside, they get collided or correlated, and then they typically, as their habit is, are shooting in the opposite direction. One of them influences the other one, vice versa, no matter how far apart they are, even they are at each end of the humongous, vast galaxy. So again, some experimentally interesting physicists, quantum physicists, devised some experiments later on to the point where it became repeated by colleagues. So here is a one such example. Here's a one setup here. That one is to test how the objective object in the classic sense of the word behaves. And then the lower one is quantum physics part. So one is up there is the machine gun shooting both ways. It's a device is to shoot nails, and then the holes at each end shoots one of the nails in one direction, the other to the other. And then there's that polarized at the other end with holes where the length of the nails could go through if they are rightly angled, correctly angled to match the slit at the polarized. Okay, 2. And then this gun shoots a pair of nails, but exactly same orientation to each, not necessarily the holes in the polarizer. So it's like this. Say if I use these 2 nails, symbolizing 2 nails, each from your camera angle, maybe it's perpendicularly will be first lined up like this inside the machine gun. And that it shoots, then it will travel the same. Side view would be something like this, okay? And then there you can see this at the tail end of the machine here, there's a recorder. Do you see that where arrow is? That tape records 0, that's miss, and then 1, that's the hit. The same thing here. So meticulously, these recorders really keep track of whether there's a hit or miss. So then there's that this also holds is split. The polarizer, it can be shifted in terms of angle, both sides. Suppose this one stays the same. This one stays perpendicularly. This one is a little slanted, angle theta, whatever it meant here, small angle, okay? So then, when all are same angle, first time this perpendicular, then there are enough hits, and then also a lot more misses, but it's a recording. Okay, and then next time, this one slanted. Okay, what that means from your angle, instead of standing like this, one is like this. So it's will travel. The one is perpendicularly, the other is slightly angular. See, like this. Okay. So then, what's happening? Just to verbally, concisely describe. Then there are some misses, and then there are hits together, angular, same image. So it is all recorded. Let's say 20% hits. Now, okay, let's go to the below contraption here. Okay, let's use positronium atoms. They have the unique properties to fit this kind of, relatively simple experiment. So then it boils up, and then it's starts going through the process of decaying. And then when positronium atom decays, it gets split, and then they get shot to travel in the opposite direction, but always oriented same. So when you say they are oriented the same angle, they were all, particularly in this case, it's the vibration is the same angle. So if two are same oriented, vibrating, always the same way, from your same way, and then if one is tilted this angle, it will also vibrate like this. See, like this. Okay, so in this case, okay, now we are getting accustomed to the concept. I'll be a little bit faster. So what's happening here is this was a positronium device. What happens is when one is kept the same, the whole, or I mean the slit orientation is perpendicular, same. So then in this case, it's the stand. This one tilted, angular, okay? Then changed, so there are hits and misses, it's recorded. And then this one brought back, this A is brought back to perpendicular, and then same thing, shooting, and it's the same because they were same, okay? And then this time, this one turned to right, and then there are similarly some misses in the same proportion. But then this time, this one is tilted this way and then further as the first one did, okay? And then again, the same process. And then it's very different. You should have come to about the same point as the upper, but because this is the particle atomic particle, it behaves different. How? And it is this. Now, when the electron is set up like that, what happens is something that was done here, okay, affected the other twin particle here, twin particle, something here inside. And then this one did not behave the way he was when there was no angle change. So then the theory, quantum physicists had to arrive. There are no other conclusions they could arrive at intelligently. So the theory here is the electron has that non-local influencing power. So without even any physical objective touching, causing anything, by simply switching this, who did that? The experimentalist, the human person. That is the key point. So by switching this, then the other, which no human person really interfered with, got changed. So then that is the non-locally influencing factor. And that has to do with the human being, in this case, the experimenter. His intention, because his intention was, let's see, if I change this, if it behaves like the nails or not. That's intention. So that intention changed the whole thing. And the error percentage was way up, way above the nails. So therefore, another name for this principle is observer created. And in this, it has another great implication for us, you and me, everyone just living through the daily lives in this setting, or in any other setting here on earth. I could even say that. So now this is really weird to say so mildly, surprising a lot. Particularly, it was so weird to the mind of Einstein. He couldn't buy it because he was a strong believer in local causality. One object has to physically move it to move the pencil. It's like this. But he couldn't buy it. And then another one, this non-local principle also violates Einstein's law. That is, nothing moves faster than the speed of light. Because that influence is instantaneous. So disturbed. And yet, out of the professional, collegial thing there, maybe, this Einstein said, spooky action at a distance. Now, this has been a great quote everywhere, I think, once you get into this kind of research. Spooky action at a distance. Okay, and later, as we will see, this non-local principle was functioning. Many biologists and others report. And talk about Candace Pert, Deepak Chopra, and Fritz Albert Paul gave us the everyday examples. Now, if you remember from early on, so did I too, but on the other side of the Pacific Pond. And I would see this humongous blanket of a flock of birds, and like a big blanket over there blocking the whole face of the sky. You know what? They move, hundreds of them, even over 1,000. They move as if it's just one bird. Do you remember by any chance seeing? I mean, through the synapses kind of arrangement, the bird at the other end of the flock cannot communicate fast enough to the one at the other end, fast enough. No one bird, straying, they could move like this. So it's Pop, Dr. Pop, reminded of that too. And the schools of fish, say along the Bahama school of fish also. They move like this. Hundreds of them as one. Okay, that's where the local principle is. Taoism, Buddhism, all points to that. Christ also mentioned some of these. Let's move on to the next principle, the participator influence. There we are. That's the then influence. First, the local, non-local. There is a much more clarified, clearly, more forcefully here. So, the observer creative principle is then human intention, human involvement. Certainly influences is seemingly dead, stuff, things like that. So, my side personal note is after learning these things, I never look at the little stone or a little piece of rock as dead. I just somehow consider them live, because I can remember particles inside these seeming dead. Okay, that's just my side note. Okay, so the experiment setup is like the, say, for the ease of presentation, like the very first one. So let's do that. Let's do this. Let's go back to the first one. Now here, okay, let me find my arrow here. Where is it? Ah, here it is. See this one, the filament? Okay. Now remember, out of two holes, the electron particles came out, creating like the wave behavior of this electron as particles right here. Now, so the experimenter said to himself, now let's see what happens. And then he shined a beam of light into the back side of these two holes here. So light was shining here. Then you know what? This particles, electron particles, then went back to the behavior of wave. So then what that means, I mean, the particle. So light behavior like the machine gun. So then in the back here, recording board, it showed like this two piles. So then you can see in the early days of quantum physics in its development, how puzzled, tongue-tied even these early quantum physics scientists might have. So, okay, so let's go to that. Participate. So then that's the clearly observer created, participator. So human, so then imagine what it's like when say a young person or at whatever age is deeply depressed, suicidal, and so on, helpless. I know that I don't have any control over my life, and then say commit suicide. Imagine that that young man, even earlier, growing up, was raised and educated under this kind of quantum physics. The chances for him to feel like that and become suicidal would be vastly diminished. When every average person among them, among us, I am one. I am now, let's say, less depressed, less often, because I have some sense of influence on all these, even interpersonal implications. So therefore, implications, quantum theory tells us that reality is in part created by the participator. I avoided observer, the word, because observer is too past form. I know the meaning of it, but more positively, I use participate. I chose it because, in fact, later I will quote from John Wheeler, quantum physicist who taught at Princeton University. He said that even this universe can be called a participatory universe. That raised goosebumps. Okay, spiritual sources. So in Taoism, now this is the Eastern integrative medicine in a way. Here's a Taoism teaching its early practitioner of health. It says, so it comes out of the Yellow Emperor's classic of medicine. When a physician is working with a patient, he must make the effort to guide the patient's mind and moods in a positive way. This classic is thousands of years old. Early on, from the beginning, the teachers of healthcare and the trainers of healthcare givers this way. Hinduism, the importance of the intention is taught. Buddhism taught deep spiritual intention and mindfulness are inseparable from getting better, leading a healthy life. And so on. Also in Christianity, some of the best examples from the gospel says things like, ask, it shall be given. And then he went on, consider how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him, those his children. And then here it is, the quote I mentioned earlier that I will get to. Does this not give support to John Wheeler, the Princeton professor? John Wheeler said, quote, in some strange sense, the universe is a participatory universe, unquote. And a lot of ramifications for our effort to figure out how to do the transformational journey. Okay, now I jump to the science segment here. Next, this one and the next one. And so that the quantum physics revolution really started affecting the life sciences. First, the biological science. And Candace Pert and Deepak Chopra, whom I will dwell on a little more on it later. They were dwelling on this point so many times. That is, Rene Descartes created the dualism 300 years ago. That has guided, influenced all the subsequent 300 years. So mind, separating mind and body. And then that created the medicine, Western medicine, the way we see it today. The side effects and so on are so tragic. And then Deepak Chopra also said somehow the Western medicine, the way it is practiced here, seems to look at the human body as a hunk of frozen meat. And the practitioners of today's medicine in the West just cut it, dissect it like a meat chunk and so on, and then fix whatever is wrong with the magic bullets he meant by that, pharmaceutical drugs and side effects and so on. Very helpful. So Candace Pert is my primary source in this section, and she created this. And then I just coined this together. Neuropeptides, emotion and surface, emotion principle. That is the internal mechanism of the human body to maintain its health and its normalcy is really quantum influenced. So in 1970s, people still sort of used drug as the solution, but there's a better way, and this is her sort of a groundbreaking research. She delved into the cellular behavior, and he was guided to come up with these terrific conclusions. And today, the world is benefiting from it. Now, this is the part of her research. Now, this here, this circle with dotted studs there, that's the cells membrane, and the dots are what she calls receptors. The cells that functions as receiving messages. Then what brings the message to the receptors? It's called a ligand. Ligand is another name of peptide, particularly neuropeptide. That is the peptide, which is a molecules made up of so many atoms and so on. And their function here is taking the informational message from one source to a cell. Cell means receptors. That's ligand. So ligand comes approaching cell. This is the enlarged presentation of cell. This is a membrane. And then these two heart-shaped is can you see there? Okay. So these cells are they represent cells, receptors. So they are waiting there, and then here comes a ligand with a message, looking for receptors, so that as it approaches, these ligands start vibrating, and Candace calls it love dance. So they dance, and then this also vibrates. So ligand joins in that love dance, and that approaches, and then when the frequency, whatever the signal is right, and then the ligand binds itself to cell. So this is the one that's right there, like a wedge. That's the line. Yeah. Okay, so then that starts the whole thing. And the human body shows the non-local action at a distance. So here she enforces that. And also body is really mind. So she calls the body, the whole thing as a body mind. So she says that the Western obsession with the brain as the only brain, the head, only the brain of the body. That's wrong. The whole body is like a brain. So body, brain. So of all the information exchange, only 2% comes from the brain, and 98% comes from the body. What a powerful. Deepak Chopra again says, reinforcing that the human body, the cells communicate faster than the speed of light. If the cells do not act that quickly, the body will fall apart. And I would believe Deepak Chopra is a Harvard-trained endocrinologist after the medical school education in India. And so therefore, her definition of mind is fascinating. In the red there, to emphasize, mind is a constantly changing flow of molecular information in motion throughout the body. So the mind is in the whole body, and also it's constantly changing depending on the molecular information flowing into it and shared by one organ or by another, and so on. So then one highlight of the Candace's contribution is she discovered the opiate receptor. Now it makes sense, right? After seeing that illustrated. Human cell has this opiate receptors. Then what is the next step? A logical conclusion? Human body can produce opiate. So that set off the rush to discover, to find opiate. So that it comes later on. It was found later. Okay, let's move on. So then the emotion, its importance now then come to the point where it is recognized and highlighted and paid attention to as it deserves. Mostly it has been in the Western tradition. It's the brain, the intellectual, and so on, ignoring emotion and its ramifications. So she says, mind, consciousness, and spirituality are not to be ignored. They need to be understood and respected and be handled as such. So the shift from realizing that consciousness, rather than being something unreal and unscientific, is central, and that consciousness creates reality, and that it is the central principle. Chopra says the same thing too. Now, the final principle that I'd like to share with you is the neuropeptides of emotion and spirituality. That's the very important thing. So then emotion creates these messages, and then the messages are carried by neuropeptide. That's a messenger. transmit. So that's it. And Taoism, for example, emphasize qi. Qi is the emotional energy, you might say. So for example, to look at just a couple of lines, they often involve emotional disease, that is. Diseases often involve emotional disharmony. For example, when one is angry, the qi rises upwards. When one is joyous, the qi disperses, and so on and so forth. Qi governs the health. It's a form of energy, and so on. So that's how the whole much neglected emotion, spirituality, and so on, and are now amplified. Christianity also deep down recognizes these elements. But again, because of that erroneous emphases, I should make it plural, started by people like Descartes and Newton. All of this, over 300 years, these elements have been neglected in the Western tradition, Western spirituality. These things I have spoken to you, and my joy may be in you, and your joy may be full. This is emphasizing the emotional side. Then now, process theology came and emphasized God, again, instead of upholding this rigid, absolute, set in stone type of approach to life and reality. Now, God is the one that is really opening up life with all of these new changes, new realizations, therefore new consciousness. Emanuel Swedenborg, who conceived the nebular hypothesis, along with being a great scientist and then later mystic and theologian. So this is really the flow of things following this trail of quantum physics revolution. And epigenetic, no victim of genes principle, again, in summation, I would say the primacy of DNA, thanks to people like James Watson, Francis Crick, and so on, the discoverer of DNA and so on, and overemphasis DNA, primacy of DNA, are all now put in their own deserved light. So, Charles Darwin's Origin of Species did quite a bit of disservice too, because emphasizing hereditary factors determining our individual destiny. It's not that DNA has not really predetermined our destiny. It gives just the blueprint of our characteristic things, and just gives the blueprint for cells to model after that, to replicate other cells and so on. All right, so then spiritual perspective is the same too. Many spiritual traditions, particularly in the West, in the East, emphasizes that things are not set by your predetermined anything. So as long as you are not really attached to your expectations and so on, if you stay loose and open, and life will guide you to the enlightenment part. So suffering will be gone, set free from attachment to genes, for example, and liberation will come. So, for example, predestination, the most severe or examples of it would say and lead people, many people, unsuspecting people, to believe that some people are already predestined to go to hell if they don't, quote unquote, behave. So what a cool thing. Then came people like Emmanuel Swedenborg, to whom I alluded earlier. And then he said, all human beings are created to go to heaven. And some may need a little bit more regeneration. The regeneration begins from leaving one's ignorance and be opened up and regenerate, be taught new also. Then that person too will go to heaven. And process theology now comes saying, correcting that this loving, all infinite God, creator, does not predetermine even that person before even that person is born. It's not true. All are they destined to grow, mature, to be fit for all. And then other things, the things are open and very much consistent with a new reality view created by quantum physics. And then at the end of this training course, I offer some segment in the name of 7 phases of joyful transformation. It's following basically the phases set up by, offered by Yoga Vasistha, the author of the Supreme Yoga, the Hindu Ayurvedic tradition. So here to give you in the summary fashion. So first, this joyful transformation begins with the pure wish and intention. Examining and the current situation and so on, one comes to realization. Why do I continue to be a fool? And then this person starts seeking to be freed, seeking liberation from the current situation. Phase 2, then deep inquiry begins in earnest. So this person, looks for teachers, coaches, holy masters, or whatever books, written materials, or in today's situation, whatever, some Zoom webinars, so some research or retreats and so on. All sources are available there. So deep inquiry, phase 2. Phase 3, then as a person moves through this process, his or her mind becomes subtle and transparent mind emerges, because this inquiry thins out mental condition, quote unquote. And meditation is a very good factor in this process. And then I saved this one principle when I was dealing with the principles of quantum physics, namely quantum leap. It is an extraordinary behavior of the electron. This electron circles around this way and that way, changes the orbit. Probably that's why early quantum physicists realized that real picture of the interior atom is like that cotton ball, as an analogy I shared with you. It's very fuzzy, see? But that's this electronic, this electron itself behaves so up and down, and so there's no neat orbit continually repeated. So that it jumps up and jumps down and so on. And the quantum physicists cannot explain why the electron does it, and why they cannot expect to point at such and such point in time, it will turn to particle or wave, things like that. Okay. So that's where the term quantum leap. So it is, the behavior is non-linear, non-algorithmic, is continuous creative jump. And then this growing transformational process, suddenly this person, seeking person, realizes something extraordinary, cannot explain it, because it is non-linear, not algorithmic, is continuous creative jump, all unexpected. But then it is due to, in a way, was that preparation going, that previous phases up to this point. The next phase, phase 5, cessation of objectivity and duality. Then this person realized, there's no really clear-cut division, no division, no, the object and me separate. This person is becoming unified with his or her environment. His life is really more spontaneous and so on. So, quote, only as long as one believes in objective existence does desire arise. This is so profound. When you are still separated and not unified, then you are still objective. So you have this over there separate from you. And then so therefore then it looks good and you want it and you develop desire, you see? And then you go after. Then what? You are a prisoner. Then later, as this process continues, you realize, aha. So that quantum leap, for example, is a tremendous quantum moment when I am in the process of liberation. And then when that happens, and then thereafter, phase 6 comes engagement in action and non-attachment to the fruits of the action. What it is then you engage in action as you are motivated from deep within, see? And then what happens? Then you do not expect anything you would gain. It's non-attachment. You are not attached. So there is no attachment. Therefore, you are not worried about what's going to happen. Because there is no you and me, it and me, I want it, and so on. But rather discovers it's all within you. By that time, what happens? And then truly you arrive at the transcendent self in the unity of it. You just feel the sense of all is one. Everything is united with everything else. That's when there's no you and me. So in the one who has obtained this phase, self-knowledge is spontaneous, natural, and unbroken. This person is rejoicing in her and her own, his own self. Quote, he who has reached this state, though he is engaged in diverse external activity, rests in himself. unquote. Thank you very much. And on this bottom of the slide, you'll see my contact information. And you are welcome anytime to send me any questions or any request of other information, or even including the bibliography that is based on this presentation. Thank you so much. It is my honor and pleasure to have shared my thought. Goodbye. Joyful transformation to you all. Thank you.